Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Lex, and today I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Vera.
Hey everyone, great to be here.
Today we're going deep on a topic that's super relevant for, well, pretty much anyone leading a team these days. We're talking about middle management and how their role is, kind of changing and evolving in the modern workplace.
Definitely.
We've got a whole stack of research and articles to unpack. Like there's one called Managers Can't Do It All, and then another one that's called In Praise of Middle Managers. So it seems like people have some strong opinions about middle management and where they fit in,
Yeah, lots of debate about their role these days.
for sure. So to kick things off, I'm curious, have you ever felt stuck in the middle at work? Like you've got your boss pushing you from one side and then your team needing you on the other side. It's a tough spot to be in.
Oh, absolutely. And it feels like the workplace itself is constantly changing too, right? Making it even harder to keep up.
Totally. So we're going to try to make sense of all this. And our research actually points to a pretty startling statistic. It turns out that 68%, a whopping 68% of middle managers report feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, no wonder they're looking for new strategies. It's like they're constantly getting hit by all these changes.
That's a good way to put it. Like waves crashing down, right?
Exactly, waves of change. And if we think back over the past few decades, there have been some major shifts that have really impacted middle managers. I'd say there are four main waves, so to speak.
Okay. I like where this is going. Let's break down these waves.
All right, so the first wave, if you will, started back in the 90s with all that talk about process reengineering. The focus was all about efficiency and streamlining. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Cutting costs, doing more with less, that whole thing.
Right. And for a lot of managers, this meant taking on more tasks themselves. They had to become these player coaches, which really shifted their power and responsibilities.
So they weren't just managing, they were doing the work too.
Exactly. Okay, so that was wave one. Wave two came along in the 2000s and 2010s with the rise of, you guessed it, technology and digitization.
Ah, the digital wave. Everything's going online. Information is flowing everywhere.
Exactly. And suddenly, CEOs could communicate directly with everyone in the company. Middle managers weren't needed as these gatekeepers of information anymore, which, left them feeling a bit less essential.
I can see how that would be unsettling.
Oh, definitely. Then, just as companies were kind of getting used to that, wave three hit agile methodologies.
Agile. So we're talking about like Scrum, Kanban, all those new ways of working and forming teams.
Exactly. And with agile, managers had less control over fixed roles and responsibilities because teams became more fluid and project-based.
So much less top-down control, a lot more flexibility and collaboration.
Exactly. And then, of course, came wave four, the big one that no one saw coming, the pandemic.
Oh yeah, that threw everything for a loop.
It really did. And one of the biggest impacts was the sudden rise of remote work, right? So on top of everything else, managers now had to figure out how to build relationships and lead teams virtually, which is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, that's a whole new set of challenges. So
Yeah.
essentially, each of these waves has like fundamentally changed what it means to be a middle manager.
Yeah, it's changed their power, the skills they need, and even the basic structure of teams.
It's a lot to adapt to. So the big question is, with all these changes, what does it actually mean to be a successful middle manager today? Like, what does that role even look like now?
Well, the research suggests it's not enough to just be a manager anymore. You need to be a people leader.
People leader. Okay, I like that. What's the difference?
It's about making this shift in three key areas: power, skills, and structure.
Okay, let's unpack those. Starting with this power shift.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
In the past, managerial success was often measured by individual achievements, right? Like what you accomplished as a manager. But now it's really all about empowering your team and making them successful.
Interesting. So it's a shift from me to we.
Exactly. The best managers now are judged not just on hitting those business targets, but also on how well they build engaged, inclusive, and skilled teams.
Makes sense. So it's less about being the hero manager and more about being the coach who helps everyone else shine.
That's a great way to put it. And that leads right into the skills shift. The old command and control style of management, yeah, that's out.
So no more barking orders.
Not if you want to be successful. Today's middle managers need to be performance coaches. They need to be guiding and developing their team members so they can, reach their full potential.
So more mentoring, less dictating.
Exactly. It's about fostering growth and creating an environment where people feel supported and can thrive. And this ties into the structural shift as well. We've gone from these rigid, hierarchical structures to more fluid, dynamic teams.
Right. More agile, less top-down.
Exactly. And managers need to be comfortable with this ambiguity and able to adapt to ever-changing needs and priorities.
Yeah, gone are the days of fixed roles and annual performance reviews.
Yeah.
It's all about continuous feedback and development now.
Absolutely. It's a much faster, more agile environment, and middle managers need to be able to keep up. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
So we've talked about all these big kind of theoretical shifts, but it's always helpful to see how this actually plays out in the real world, right?
Mhm.
Like, are there any companies out there that are really like nailing this transformation of the middle manager role?
Oh, absolutely. Our research highlights some really interesting examples like Standard Chartered Bank, IBM, and
Uh,
Home.
Telstra, okay, those are some big names. What are they doing differently?
Well, Standard Chartered Bank, they really went all in on, emphasizing the human element of management. They even changed the job title from manager to people leader.
I love that. It's like symbolic, but it sends a strong message about what they value.
Right. And they didn't stop there. They created this whole accreditation process for people leaders, focusing on skills like building trust, driving growth, and making bold decisions. They also made a real effort to create a stronger sense of community among their managers.
So it's not just about individual development. It's about creating this supportive network where managers can learn from each other.
Yeah, exactly. Now, IBM, they took a bit of a different approach, focusing more on leveraging technology.
Okay, interesting. How so?
Well, they introduced AI-powered tools to automate some of those, tedious administrative tasks like approving expenses and transferring employees, stuff that, takes up a lot of
I
time.
mean, anything that can reduce that administrative burden sounds good to me.
Right. And they also created these personalized digital learning programs that managers could access on their phones, just-in-time support whenever they needed it. They even used AI to analyze data and help managers with things like identifying attrition risks and, even determining salary increases.
Wow, so they're using technology to take some of the guesswork and stress out of those tough decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Telstra, they took a much bolder approach. They actually restructured their whole organization, flattening the hierarchy. And get this, they split the traditional manager role into
Hold
two.
on, two separate roles.
Two. They have leader of people and leader of work. It's a pretty radical change.
That's a big change.
Yeah.
So how does that actually work?
So leaders of people, they're responsible for managing groups of employees who have, similar skills. They're organized into these chapters based on their expertise. The focus there is on skill development, fostering collaboration, and supporting career growth. You could almost think of them like a guild master in a video game, nurturing talent within a specific craft.
Okay, I get it. So they're the talent development specialists.
Exactly. And then you have the leaders of work who, they oversee the actual projects and deliverables. They're all about execution, making sure things get done on time and to the required standard.
So it's like a division of responsibilities, letting each leader really focus on their strengths.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that both leaders are judged on their performance. So, they look at metrics like employee engagement and project success.
So it's not just about dividing the work, it's about making sure each leader is accountable for their specific area.
Exactly. And it's interesting, this dual manager model isn't totally new. You see similar structures in consulting firms with practice leaders and project leaders.
Right, right.
But Telstra has really shown that it can work across different functions in a large organization.
It's really fascinating to see how these companies are like experimenting with all these different approaches. What strikes me listening to these examples is how vital middle managers are in, bridging the gap between senior leadership and those frontline employees.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, one of the articles we have, The Real Value of Middle Managers, it really digs into this idea. It talks about how effective middle managers act as these connecting leaders, creating these vital links throughout the organization.
Connecting leaders. I like that term.
Mm.
So it's not just about managing up or down, it's about connecting across the whole company.
Exactly. The article makes the point that middle managers are in this, unique position to do this. They really understand what's happening on the ground and they're plugged into the company's strategic goals. They can connect the dots in a way that, few others can.
They're kind of like translators then,
Mm.
taking that big picture strategy and turning it into something their teams can actually understand and act on.
Exactly. And the article goes even further, breaking down connecting leaders into 4 distinct types: the Janus leader, the broker, the conduit, and the tightrope walker.
Ooh, okay. I am definitely intrigued. Those are some interesting names.
Each type has its own strengths and approaches to, bridging that gap.
Okay, so we've got our work cut out for us. It sounds like we have a lot more to unpack here. What do you say we dive into those four types in the next part of our deep dive?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, let's get into these connecting leader types. We left off talking about the Janus leader. I think most people kind of recognize that name, right?
Yeah, from Roman mythology, right?
The god with two faces.
That's the one. Looking in opposite directions.
Exactly. And that's kind of the essence of a Janus leader in the workplace, too. They have to keep one eye on their superiors, the higher-ups, and the other eye on their team. It's all about understanding both sides.
So like the goals, the pressures, the perspectives.
Yeah, all of that. And being able to empathize with each. They're constantly looking up and down the hierarchy, making sure that, everyone feels heard and understood.
So they're like master communicators, translating messages, smoothing things over between different levels of the organization. Exactly. They're great at building relationships, finding common ground, but honestly, it can be a tough balancing act. Constantly juggling the needs of both sides, that can lead to burnout if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like constantly walking a tightrope.
It really is. And that's something organizations need to be aware of. They need to provide these Janus leaders with the right kind of support and coaching to help them manage that stress.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Okay, so that's the Janus leader. Who's next on our list of connecting leader types?
Next up, we have the broker. Think of them as the master negotiators, the mediators, always trying to smooth over conflict and find those win-win solutions.
So they're like the peacemakers of the office.
Pretty much. They're really good at facilitating dialogue, identifying shared goals, helping people see each other's point of view. They also have a knack for, navigating those tricky office politics.
Yeah, knowing when to push, when to compromise. Sounds like you need a good dose of diplomacy and tact to be a successful broker.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But even the best negotiators can hit roadblocks, right?
For sure. So what are some of the challenges they face?
One of the biggest is getting buy-in from higher-ups. If senior management isn't open to dialogue, if they're not willing to collaborate, it's really hard for the broker to do their job effectively.
So the company culture plays a huge role.
Absolutely. If there's no transparency, no humility at the top, brokers are going to have a tough time.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, moving on to our third type of connecting leader, the conduit. What can you tell us about them?
Conduits, they're the voice of their team. The ones who aren't afraid to bring their team's concerns and ideas to the attention of senior management, even if it's, a bit uncomfortable.
So they're the ones who stand up for their people, make sure their voices are heard.
That's it. They're not afraid to speak truth to power, even if it means, challenging the status quo or pushing back against decisions that they think are harmful to their team.
That takes guts, especially in a more traditional hierarchical organization where, rocking the boat can be seen as a bad thing.
It definitely does. Conduits, they put themselves out there, which, can be risky. If management isn't receptive to feedback or, sees them as a troublemaker, it could actually damage their career.
So it really comes down to psychological safety, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's a culture of fear or people are afraid to speak up, conduits might stay silent even if they see problems that need to be addressed.
Exactly. Creating that environment where honest communication is valued, where it's actually encouraged, that's so important for conduits to thrive.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the Janus leader, the broker, the conduit, who's our final leadership archetype.
Our last one is the tightrope walker. These leaders are super analytical, strategic, constantly weighing the different needs and demands, from both above and below.
So they're always walking that fine line, making tough calls, trying to keep everyone happy, even when those interests are, totally clashing.
That's it. They're really good at identifying like the root cause of problems. They consider different perspectives, weigh the potential consequences of, each decision.
They got to be comfortable with ambiguity, complexity.
Yeah.
And I imagine they need some serious organizational skills too, right? Just to keep from getting overwhelmed by all those competing demands.
No, absolutely. There's a real risk of cognitive overload for tightrope walkers. They're constantly bombarded with information, requests, all that. So they need to be able to prioritize effectively, delegate when necessary, and, trust their team.
Otherwise, they'll burn out trying to do it all themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, so these four connecting leader types, Janus, broker, conduit, and tightrope walker. I mean, it's really interesting how they paint this picture of what it takes for middle managers to like navigate all the complexities of today's workplace. It's not just about, managing tasks anymore. It's about building bridges, fostering those connections across the whole organization.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that these aren't like mutually exclusive roles, you know?
Right. It's not like you're just one type.
Exactly. A single manager might, embody different types depending on the situation, the needs of their team.
So it's more about recognizing these different approaches and developing the flexibility to adapt.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about managing teams, bridging those gaps between different levels, but I'm also curious to explore, another key relationship for middle managers, and that's the one they have with their own boss.
Yes. Managing upwards. It's just as important as managing downwards, but honestly, it often gets overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. It can be tricky.
It can. But luckily, we have this article in our stack called Managing Your Boss, and it offers some really great insights on this topic.
Perfect. I'm eager to dive into that. Okay, so let's dig into this Managing Your Boss article. What are some of the big takeaways? What are some common mistakes that managers make when it comes to, their relationship with their boss?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is underestimating how much your boss actually depends on you, you know?
Yeah, like maybe not seeing yourself as that crucial.
Exactly. A lot of managers, they don't realize the impact they have on their boss's success. They don't always see how much their boss relies on them to, get things done to achieve their goals.
So it's really a two-way street. You need your boss for guidance and support,
Yeah.
but they also need you to, execute effectively and make them look good.
Exactly. It's a partnership. And just as important is recognizing how much you depend on your boss, right? Like, it's easy to think we can do it all on our own.
Yeah, the lone wolf approach.
But in reality, we all need that support from above, to set priorities, to get the information we need, to stay connected to the bigger picture.
It's definitely a partnership, not a power struggle.
Well said.
So how can managers build a healthier, more productive relationship with their boss? What does this article recommend?
It really comes down to two things: understanding and managing. First, you need to really understand your boss. And I mean, like, going beyond those surface level interactions.
Yeah, really getting to know them.
Right. You need to understand their goals, their pressures, their strengths, their weaknesses, even their preferred communication style.
It's like creating this mental profile of your boss, what makes them tick.
Exactly. And just as important is understanding yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? How does your personality, your work style, influence how you interact with authority figures?
Self-awareness is so key here.
It really is. You got to be mindful of how your own tendencies and habits might be, affecting the relationship.
For sure. So once you have a good understanding of like both yourself and your boss, then you can start to actually like manage the relationship.
Exactly. And that means, figuring out a way of working together that really suits both of your styles and needs.
Finding that sweet spot.
Right. For example, the article talks about adapting to your boss's communication style. Some bosses are listeners. They prefer, face-to-face conversations, while others are more readers. They like to process information in writing first.
That makes sense. You don't want to show up to a meeting with this big detailed report if your boss prefers to, read it over in advance.
Exactly. It's about respecting their time, their preferences.
Right, right.
And the article also talks about, setting clear expectations. Don't just assume you know what your boss wants from you. Be proactive. Clarify those expectations up front.
So open and honest communication, as always.
Absolutely. And that leads to another really important point, dependability and honesty. Your boss needs to know that they can rely on you to be truthful, even when, things aren't going so well.
Yeah, no sugarcoating bad news.
Exactly. Transparency builds trust.
Makes sense. Be someone your boss can count on.
And one last tip I'll add: be mindful of your boss's time and resources. Don't, bombard them with every little issue. Don't waste their time on things you could handle yourself. Be strategic with your requests.
Great advice. Okay, so to kind of wrap all this up, it sounds like managing your boss isn't about, sucking up or playing politics. It's really about understanding that mutual dependence.
Yeah, and building a strong working relationship, focusing on, what's best for everyone involved.
It's about seeing it as a partnership.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into the world of middle management. We've covered a lot of ground, from those 4 waves of change to the different types of connecting leaders to even, managing up and building that strong relationship with your boss.
I feel like we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I think so too. And speaking of our listeners, many of you are business owners, C-level executives, and we know you're always looking for ways to, improve your leadership skills and stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. And if you're looking to elevate your business in the digital world, well, that's where Shield Media can help.
That's right. We specialize in helping businesses, especially those in the Western market, leverage the power of digital marketing. So whether you're thinking about, local SEO, PPC campaigns, or social media marketing, we've got you covered.
We have a fantastic team of experts who are, passionate about helping businesses thrive in this digital age.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, man, I really need to step up my digital marketing game, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to us at Shield Media. We'd love to chat and see how we can help.
Absolutely. You can find us online at website address or connect with us on social media.
Perfect. And of course, we always love hearing from our listeners. So if you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that follow button and share with anyone who you think might benefit.
Spread the knowledge.
Exactly. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. This is Lex and Vera signing off from the deep dive. Until next time.